The world remembers the night of August 31st, 1997, with the horrific sound of screeching metal echoing in the Pont de l'Alma Tunnel in Paris. Official history has recorded that Diana, Princess of Wales, died in a tragic traffic accident. It was presented as the terrible, inevitable outcome of a relentless media pursuit, combined with excessive speed and alcohol. But in the shadow of this official narrative, a much darker, far more sensational claim quickly took root. The man shouting this claim was the billionaire businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed, the father of the man who died beside Diana that night, Dodi Fayed. His accusation was simple and devastating. This was not an accident, but an assassination carried out by the British establishment, by the deep state. And the reason for this murder, he claimed, was a secret that Diana was carrying in her womb, a secret the monarchy could never ever accept. This secret, if true, had the power to shake not only the foundations of the British monarchy, but the entire balance of the Western world. The mother of the next heirs to the throne was pregnant by a Muslim man, and she was expecting a Muslim heir. Before we descend into the fog of this story, into the murky world of evidence, allegations, and conspiracies, we ask that if you wish for us to light the way through these dark corridors of history together, you please subscribe to our channel. Your support is what gives us the strength to bring these untold stories into the light. It all began in the brilliant sunshine of the Mediterranean, during the hot summer months of 1997. Diana, following her painful and public divorce from Prince Charles, had been stripped of her Royal Highness title, but in doing so, had solidified her title as the People's Princess, forever. She was adrift, but she was also for the first time free. It was then that she accepted an invitation from Mohammed Al-Fayed to holiday aboard his luxury yacht, the Jonikal, with his son, Dodi. For the paparazzi, this was the opportunity of the century. The most photographed woman in the world had embarked on a new and very public love affair. The photographs captured and broadcast around the globe showed a Diana who looked more relaxed, happier, and more liberated than she had in years. She was seen laughing, diving into the turquoise water, and sharing intimate moments with Dodi. But those same photographs, while fueling a global media frenzy, were also setting off alarm bells in the cold, grey halls of Buckingham Palace and at the MI6 headquarters on the banks of the Thames. The people's beloved princess, the mother of a future king, was in the arms of an Egyptian-born playboy. This was more than just a summer fling. It was a public relations nightmare for the carefully protected image and the unblemished lineage of the crown. While the world saw a blossoming romance, Mohammed Al-Fayed, a man perpetually at war with the British establishment that had denied him citizenship, saw something else. He saw an opportunity. He saw the ultimate acceptance. And according to his own narrative, this plan began with a ring. At the very center of this conspiracy, or perhaps this love story, sits a single tangible object. A diamond ring from the luxury jeweler Rapassi, engraved with the words "Dis-moi oui," or "Tell me yes." Dodi Fayed purchased this ring in Paris just before that final, fatal night. For Mohammed Al-Fayed, this was the concrete proof that his son was preparing to propose to Diana, and he would later insist that she had already accepted. This claim instantly elevated the narrative from a simple, passionate affair to a serious, life-altering commitment. It suggested a future that the royal family would have found untenable. But was it true? The official British investigation, Operation Paget, meticulously examined this very claim. They interviewed Diana's closest friends and confidants, women who had spoken to her in her final weeks. The consensus from them was different. They testified that while Diana was certainly fond of Dodi and enjoying the lavish affection he showered upon her, she was not ready for a new marriage. Certainly not one this fast. Some believed Diana was simply rebounding, using the very public affair to enjoy her freedom, and perhaps to make the man she truly loved, the heart surgeon Hasnat Khan, jealous. That relationship had ended precisely because Khan could not bear the suffocating media spotlight that followed her. The ring, therefore, might have been just another extravagant gift from a man known for them, not a formal oath of engagement. But for Al-Fayed, this ring was the cornerstone of his entire argument. It was the symbol of his son's intent, the proof that Diana was being welcomed into his family and the very motive for her murder. What Diana herself didn't know was that this final trip to Paris, meant to be a fleeting romantic getaway before she returned to her sons in London, was not just the end of a holiday. It was the final act in an operation that would seal her fate. That night, Saturday, August 30th, the Ritz Hotel in Paris became less of a sanctuary and more of a gilded cage. The atmosphere was suffocating. A swarm of paparazzi numbering in the dozens had laid siege to the front entrance, their cameras and flashes creating a chaotic, relentless wall of light. Diana and Dodi had attempted to have dinner in the hotel's main restaurant, l'Espadon, but the attention, even from other diners, was unbearable. They retreated to the privacy of the imperial suite, but the pressure from outside was mounting. Dodi became increasingly agitated, reportedly furious at the security team's inability to control the situation. He was determined to leave the hotel and retreat to the privacy of his apartment off the Champs-Élysées, but he was equally determined to do so without giving the paparazzi the money shot of him and Diana as a couple. A plan was hatched, a plan that in retrospect was fatally flawed. It was a classic decoy operation. One car would leave from the front of the hotel to draw the main pack of photographers, while Dodi and Diana would slip out the back into a different, less conspicuous vehicle. This last-minute ad hoc decision would have catastrophic consequences. The man tasked with driving the second car was not a trained chauffeur. He was Henri Paul, the hotel's acting head of security. He had been recalled to the hotel, having been off duty for hours. Eyewitnesses would later describe him as being in unusually high spirits, almost giddy, even seen taunting the photographers at the front entrance, as if daring them to a chase he was about to orchestrate. Shortly after midnight, the couple descended to the rear exit, the Rue Cambon. There, a black Mercedes S280 was waiting. It was not an armored car. It was not Dodi's usual vehicle. With them was Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard, the only one who would wear a seatbelt and the only one who would survive. Henri Paul took the wheel, Diana and Dodi in the back. The car shot out of the rear alleyway and into the streets of Paris, immediately pursued by a handful of persistent photographers on high-speed motorcycles. The chase was on. Henri Paul, perhaps fueled by adrenaline or the 3 times legal limit of alcohol that would later be found in his system, accelerated wildly. The Mercedes was a powerful car, but he was pushing it to its limits, careening through the Paris night at speeds estimated to be well over 100 miles per hour. It was a journey that lasted only a few minutes. As they approached the Pont de l'Alma Tunnel, which runs alongside the River Seine, the car was a black blur. It entered the tunnel, dipped down the embankment, and never came out. At approximately 12:23 a.m., the Mercedes, traveling at a horrific speed, clipped a white Fiat Uno, a mysterious car that would vanish from the scene before losing control. It swerved violently, smashing into the 13th concrete pillar supporting the tunnel's roof. The sound was an explosion of metal, a final, deafening bang that echoed through the empty tunnel. Then silence. The car, a mangled wreck, rebounded and came to rest facing the opposite direction. Inside, the scene was one of utter devastation. Dodi Fayed and Henri Paul were killed instantly by the sheer force of the impact. Trevor Rees-Jones, in the front passenger seat, was catastrophically injured, his face crushed. But he was alive, and in the back, behind the driver's seat, Diana, Princess of Wales, was also still alive. She was slumped on the floor of the car, critically injured but conscious. Dr. Frederick Mailles, an off-duty emergency physician who was driving through the tunnel just moments later, was the first medically trained person on the scene. He saw the smoke, the wreckage, and the victims. He did not recognize the princess, but he saw a blonde woman with a serious head injury, but who was clearly breathing. He called for emergency services and tried to comfort her, but this is where the timeline, the official logical sequence of events, begins to break down. This is where the seeds of the conspiracy are planted. In a British or American medical system, the protocol for such a crash is scoop and run. A patient with massive internal trauma is transported to the nearest surgical hospital with maximum speed. But in Paris that night, the French emergency services followed a different doctrine: treat at the scene. An agonizingly long period of time, by some estimates, over an hour, was spent attempting to stabilize Diana inside the wreckage before she was finally extricated. The ambulance, when it finally departed, did not race to the hospital. It traveled at an agonizingly slow pace, reportedly stopping at least once, supposedly to stabilize her blood pressure. Diana did not arrive at the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital, just a few miles away, until after 2 o'clock in the morning. For nearly 2 hours, doctors fought a desperate, losing battle to save her, performing open-heart surgery to repair a massive tear to her pulmonary vein. But the internal damage was too catastrophic. The blood loss was too great. At 4 a.m. on August 31, 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, was officially pronounced dead. The world awoke in total shock, and in that vacuum of grief, a single toxic question began to form. Why did it take so long to save her? As the world woke to the unbelievable news, the focus shifted from the dark tunnel to the sterile, brightly lit corridors of the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital. Diana's body lay in a private room, a princess of a foreign land, now a subject of the French state's legal and medical procedures. Standard protocol in any case of a sudden, violent, or suspicious death, particularly one involving a car crash, is a full and immediate autopsy. This is a non-negotiable step in the chain of evidence, designed to determine the exact cause of death, to rule out foul play, and to gather toxicological data. The world, and indeed the law, expected this. But this is not what happened. In those chaotic, grief-stricken hours, as Prince Charles and Diana's 2 sisters were scrambling to board a Royal Air Force jet to fly to Paris, a decision was made. It was a decision that would forever taint the official investigation and become the single most powerful piece of evidence in Mohammed Al-Fayed's conspiracy. It was the decision to embalm the body of the Princess of Wales. Embalming is a complex, invasive procedure. It is not a legal requirement, nor is it a medical necessity in the immediate hours after death. It involves draining the body of all blood and bodily fluids, and replacing them with a solution of formaldehyde and other preserving chemicals. It is a process designed to do one thing: preserve the body's tissues and prevent decomposition. But in this specific case, it did something else. It effectively destroyed the one thing investigators would need to confirm or deny the rumor that was already beginning to circulate: the biological evidence of pregnancy. Any test for the HCG hormone, the definitive marker of pregnancy, is conducted on blood. By draining Diana's body of all her blood, the authorities, whether by design or by catastrophic error, had just washed away the primary evidence. This act made any future blood test completely and permanently impossible. This single, irreversible step is the reason the pregnancy rumor has endured for decades. It created a question that could no longer be definitively, scientifically answered. The official explanation was that this was a standard procedure, a courtesy done out of respect for the princess and the royal family, to ensure her body was preserved for its return to the United Kingdom in the late summer heat. But this explanation crumbled under even the slightest scrutiny. Embalming is highly unusual in France, especially before an autopsy has been concluded, and the order for it was given by a local French official, supposedly after consulting with hospital staff and, it was vaguely implied, someone from the British side. Who gave that final, fatal order? To this day, no one has ever taken full responsibility. Prince Charles and Diana's family, the people who should have been consulted, were still in the air, flying to Paris, completely unaware that this procedure was being carried out. They arrived to find it already done. For Mohammed Al-Fayed, this was not a procedural error. It was the smoking gun. It was, in his eyes, a deliberate, calculated, and cynical act of evidence tampering, orchestrated by the British establishment, by MI6, acting on orders from the very top of the royal family. The motive in his mind was clear and singular: to conceal the fact that Diana was carrying his grandchild. He would later claim that Diana had called him from the yacht just days before, thanking him for the holiday and for his son, and that she had confirmed to him personally that she was pregnant. He claimed that Dodi had also called ecstatic, saying they had wonderful news and were returning to London to announce their engagement and the pregnancy. This claim formed the dark heart of the motive Al-Fayed would present to the world. This was not simply a case of the monarchy disliking a new boyfriend. This was a matter of state, a matter of succession, and a matter of bloodline. The idea that the mother of the future King of England, Prince William, could be carrying, and perhaps soon marrying into, a Muslim family was, in Al-Fayed's narrative, an absolute anathema to the crown. It was an unthinkable scenario. A Muslim heir connected so closely to the throne would shatter centuries of tradition and, in their minds, threaten the very identity of the monarchy. This, Al-Fayed insisted, was why she had to be stopped. And when the crash failed to kill her instantly, the cover-up began immediately in that hospital room with a syringe full of formaldehyde. The battle lines were drawn. Mohammed Al-Fayed, a man of immense wealth and stubborn determination, was not just a grieving father. He was an adversary who could not be ignored or silenced. He used his fortune to launch a relentless, multi-decade legal and media war against the British state. His persistent allegations, which he leveled at everyone from Prince Philip himself to the heads of MI6, forced the British government to respond. They could not let the accusation of regicide, of murdering the most famous woman on earth, hang in the air. This forced the hand of the British police, who, under enormous public and political pressure, launched Operation Paget. This was one of the most exhaustive, complex, and expensive investigations in British history, led by one of its most respected police chiefs, Lord Stevens. The sole purpose of Operation Paget was to forensically examine every single one of Mohammed Al-Fayed's conspiracy claims, most especially the claim of pregnancy. Lord Stevens and his team of investigators spent years and millions of pounds sifting through every piece of evidence. They re-interviewed every witness. They used cutting-edge technology to reconstruct the crash, and crucially, they hunted down the biological evidence. They discovered that, despite the embalming, some of the original blood samples taken by the French authorities at the hospital before the embalming process began had been preserved. These samples, which had been part of the initial toxicological work on Henri Paul, were the key. Operation Paget's scientists conducted highly sensitive DNA and hormonal tests on these surviving blood samples. The findings, when they were finally published in a massive 800-page report, were stark, clinical, and unambiguous. The tests conducted on the pre-embalming blood sample from Diana, Princess of Wales, show no trace of the HCG hormone. Our conclusion is that at the time of her death, she was not pregnant. The investigation also methodically dismantled Al-Fayed's other claims. They concluded that the Dis-moi-oui ring was not an engagement ring and that Diana had shown no intention of marrying Dodi. They concluded that Henri Paul was indeed drunk, that the speed of the car was the primary cause of the crash, and that there was zero credible evidence of any involvement by MI6, Prince Philip, or any other government agency. The official verdict was unlawful killing, but the blame was placed squarely on the gross negligence of the driver, Henri Paul, and the pursuing paparazzi. But for Mohammed Al-Fayed and for millions of skeptics around the world, this was just another layer of the cover-up. The official report was, in their eyes, the establishment investigating itself, and unsurprisingly, finding itself innocent. The questions about the blood samples persisted. How could they be sure the samples weren't contaminated after so many years? How could they be certain the samples taken in the chaos of that night even belonged to Diana? And most importantly, the embalming itself remained the original sin of the investigation. The very fact that the procedure had been done against all protocol gave endless life to the suspicion that there was something to hide. If there was no pregnancy, why take the one action that would make it look like you were covering one up? In the end, the story of Diana's alleged pregnancy is not a story about a simple biological fact. It is a story about what that fact would have represented. The official investigation concluded, based on scientific evidence, that there was no baby. But the conspiracy survives and thrives because it speaks to a deeper, more emotional truth. It speaks to the uncomfortable relationship between an ancient monarchy and the modern, multicultural world. It speaks to the very real anxieties the establishment had about Diana, a woman who had broken all their rules in life and who, even in death, seemed to be challenging them. Mohammed Al-Fayed died in 2023, never having convinced the British authorities but having successfully convinced millions that his son and the people's princess were murdered. And so the question remains, etched into history. Was the Muslim heir a paranoid delusion, the grief-stricken fantasy of a father who lost everything? Or was it a genuine secret, a secret so dangerous that it triggered a desperate act of state-sanctioned murder, forever concealed by a swift, Clinical injection of formaldehyde in a lonely Paris hospital room? The evidence says no, but the doubt, like the legend of the princess herself, will likely live forever.